The first time I walked in, there was a level still sitting on the top plate of a half-framed wall, bubble dead center. Somebody set it down thinking they'd be right back. That somebody was Frank. He'd been gone 11 months by the time his wife Eleanor called me. She stood in the doorway of what was going to be their retirement house, and she said real quiet, "Everyone told away." The place smelled like sawdust that had gone damp. Cold in there. That hollow cold a house gets when nobody's breathed in it for a year. Framing up, roof on, but no windows. Snow had blown in through the openings and settled in the corners like it owned the place. Half a house, that's what Frank left, and half a house is worse than no house because you can see exactly what a man was reaching for right before he ran out of time. I told Eleanor I'd finish it. 16 weeks, around $140,000 to close it in, wire it, plumb it, and make it the home Frank drew on the back of a feed store receipt she kept in her purse. Let me tell you what I was standing in. Frank started this in the spring of the year he passed, 52 years old, worked at the sawmill 2 towns over his whole life, and he'd been saving for this piece of land since he was 30. 6 acres, a slope down to a creek, sugar maples along the north line. He wasn't a builder by trade, but he was a millman, and a millman knows wood the way a shepherd knows sheep. He could read a board the way I read a room. Eleanor showed me a photo from that first spring. Frank standing on the deck he'd just decked, arms out, grinning like a kid. Framing behind him, straight as a Sunday sermon. He did most of it himself. Weekends, evenings, vacation days. His buddy from the mill helped him raise the walls, and Eleanor said the two of them worked till dark and then sat on the deck with a couple of beers and argued about roof pitch. He set that pitch at a 12-12. Steep so the snow slides instead of sitting. Smart, a man who'd shoveled 60 winters knows what a roof owes him. And then one Tuesday in October, he sat down at the mill for lunch and his heart just stopped. Nothing anybody could have done. The house sat. Eleanor couldn't come out here, couldn't look at it. Her son wanted to bulldoze it and cash the land, and I understood that. I did. A bare lot sells clean. A dead man's half-finished dream is a hard thing to explain to a buyer, but she kept that receipt in her purse. You don't carry a man's drawing around for a year if you want it torn down. So I started where he stopped, and the first thing I had to know was whether what Frank built was any good or whether grief had made her hold on to something that couldn't be saved. And I'll tell you right now, Frank built it right. I climbed every wall, checked every stud with my own 4-foot level, and I want you to understand something. This man had no framing crew, no nail gun half the time. He was hand-driving 16-penny nails into Doug fir on his days off, and his walls were within an eighth of plumb, over 8 feet. I've torn out work by licensed contractors that wasn't half this square. I checked his corners for racking too. You push on a badly framed wall and it moves like a bad tooth. His didn't budge. He'd let his sheathing lap the corners the way you're supposed to, tying the whole box together so the wind can't work it loose. But half built means half exposed. 11 months of Vermont weather had gotten into things. The subfloor Frank laid on the north side had cupped where snow drifted in and melted and froze and melted. About 180 square feet of oriented strand board I had to pull and replace. That was $600 in material and a day of my back telling me I'm 56. The bigger problem was the sill. 2 spots along the east foundation, water had wicked up under a tarp Frank never got to secure, and the bottom plate had started to go punky. Not rot yet, just soft, like the first bite of a pear that's turned. I dug in with an awl. That's the whole test, and it costs you nothing. If the awl sinks a 1/4 inch under thumb pressure, you've got trouble. The fibers have let go. If it stops hard, the wood's still sound. Mine sank about 1/8 in 2 spots over maybe 4 feet total. Caught it early. If this house had sat another 2 winters, we'd be talking foundation work, jacking and shoring, and that's a whole different number. Could have turned a $140,000 finish into a $40,000 headache before I ever hung a door. Now here's where I stopped and just stood there a minute. Frank had left his tools, not all of them. But his framing square was hung on a nail by the door opening and a chalk line in that level I mentioned, and tucked up in the joist bay over what would be the kitchen. Wrapped in a feed sack, I found a bundle of old growth pine boards. Tight grain, 20 rings an inch, the kind of wood you can't buy anymore for love or money because the trees that grow that slow got cut a century back. He'd been saving them for something. There was a pencil mark on the top one, just the letter E, Eleanor. I didn't know yet what those boards were for, but I knew I wasn't going to let them become anything ordinary. The structure was the easy part, honestly, because Frank had done the hard thinking already. I got the sills sorted first. Cut out the 2 soft sections with a reciprocating saw, right back to solid wood, sistered in pressure-treated stock cut to the same thickness, bedded it in a bead of polyurethane sealant so no water works back in, and bolted it down through the foundation with new anchors set in epoxy. Anybody tells you a foundation fix is always a catastrophe, they're trying to sell you a new house. This was an afternoon and $200 in lumber. I am in hardware. Then I got the place dried in, and this is where I made my mistake, so I'll own it. I ordered the windows off Frank's rough openings, trusting his numbers because everything else he'd done was dead on. And it was. His openings were perfect, squared and cripple-studded clean. But I'd measured one of them myself in a hurry on a cold morning, gloves on, and I read a 5 as a 6 on my own tape. Ordered one window an inch too tall. That one's on me. Cost me a 2-week reorder and about $340. I didn't bill Eleanor for because a man's own arithmetic isn't his client's problem. I taped a shim of blue foam in the gap and framed it as a lesson. Check the tape twice and never trust your own eyes when your fingers are numb. Once the windows were in, the house changed. You could feel it draw breath. Light came through and hit that framing, and I swear you could see Frank's hand in every bay. He doubled his headers where he didn't strictly have to, blocked his walls for fire stops nobody was going to inspect, put backing behind where the towel bars and the handrail would go, thinking a year ahead to a wife reaching for something to steady herself. This was a man building for somebody he wanted safe for 30 more years. I reinforced the ridge where the span was a touch long for the rafter size he'd used. Over about 18 feet, a 2x10 ridge board doesn't carry, it just aligns, and I could see the faintest sag starting. So I ran a structural ridge beam, an LVL, and posted it down to the foundation through the interior wall so the load has a straight path to the ground. That's the one place I overrode Frank's plan. I figure he'd have caught it himself if he'd had another month. $2,000 in engineered lumber and a day with a come-along and some words I won't repeat. She's got good bones now. She always did. I just tightened the laces. Then came all the stuff you never see and always pay for. The house had nothing in the walls yet. No wire, no pipe, no duct. It's a shell from a home, and the part where Vermont started leaning on my neck. It was late October when I opened the walls for rough-in. Same time of year Frank passed, which I didn't think about until Eleanor mentioned it, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it. First hard frost came the second week I was wiring the calendar. I ran the electrical myself with my licensed Sparky Dale, a 100 amp service split to a 40 space panel. That leaves her room to grow, a well pump, a generator transfer switch someday without pulling everything apart. Frank had marked outlet locations in pencil on the studs. Everyone at a sensible height, every kitchen counter run he'd already thought through, plugs spaced so no cord ever crosses the sink. I followed his marks where I could. Felt like taking dictation to a fellow named Marchetti, been doing it 40 years and complains the whole time, which is how you know he cares. Is better than a copper. It'll swell instead of split if a pipe ever does catch cold, and out here that matters. Cast iron for the main drain stack so you don't hear the house working at 3 in the morning that hollow gurgle plastic gives you. About $9,000 for the whole plumbing package, rough and finish, and worth every dollar. The first winter, she doesn't wake up to a burst line. Then, insulation, and this is where I spent Eleanor's money on purpose. Closed cell spray foam in the rim, mid-joists, and the north wall, because the rim is where most houses bleed heat and nobody ever looks. Dense packed cellulose everywhere else, blown in tight so it can't settle and leave a cold gap at the top of the wall. R49 in the attic, which an ice dam and a dry roof. It's roughly $11,000, and I told her straight, this is the invisible thing that decides whether she's comfortable or fighting the house every January. We beat the deep freeze by about 9 days, got the place sealed and a temporary heater running before the mercury dropped below 0 and stayed there. There was one night, single digits, wind coming off the creek, loud enough to hear through the sheath. With a work light and a thermos, and it held its warmth. Held it. I shut the heater off just to test. She'd barely given up a degree. That's when I knew we were going to make it. Now the part where a house stops being a project and starts being somebody's morning coffee. I laid the floors first. Frank had specified oak on that receipt. One word, oak, underlined twice. I found Riffson white oak 3/4 solid and ran it the length of the main room so the grain runs with your tight and straight and it moves less with the seasons than plain sawn does. 1,600 square feet of flooring, nailed down blind through the tongue so you never see a fastener, sanded up through the grits to 120, 3 coats of a hard wax oil so it feels like wood and not like plastic. About 9,500 with the finish. You can spot repair an oil finish with a rag instead of resanding the whole floor, and she's going to want that in 10 years. The kitchen I built. What Frank promised her about this house, she said he promised her a window over the sink so she could watch the maples turn. So that's where I started. Window, dead center over the sink, sightline straight up the north. Her standing at that window. Cabinets are shaker, painted a soft bone white. Doors I ordered with a full overlay, so the face reads clean and quiet. Quartz counters because she's going to use this kitchen hard for 20 years, and quartz doesn't stain or need sealing the way stone does, and I wanted it bulletproof. Undermount sink so she can sweep crumbs right off the counter into her hand. That run was about $18,000 installed. For the light, I kept it low and warm, 2,700 Kelvin, no blue in this house. Frank was a millman. He lived under fluorescents 40 years, and I wasn't about to make his wife live under them too. Under cabinet strips over the counter so she's not working in her own shadow, and dimmers everywhere because a house needs to know how to be quiet at night. And those pine boards. Frank's hidden bundle with the E penciled on top. I finally knew what they were for. I built the mantle out of them. There's a fireplace on the gable wall, and I dressed the beam over it in Frank's old growth pine, hand planed so the surface catches light instead of a machine's flat sheen, oiled until the grain came up like honey. 20 rings an inch, remember? That's a tree that started growing before Frank's grandfather was born. He'd been saving it for something that mattered, and I made it the one thing in that house your eye goes to first. I left his pencil mark, the E. It's on the underside where you'd only see it if you were lying on the hearth looking up. But it's there. Somebody built this right the first time. My job was to not be the guy who ruins it. Let me walk you through her. Finished, pull up the drive, and the house sits into the slope like it grew there. Board and batten siding, deep charcoal standing seam roof to shed the snow off that steep pitch Frank argued for. A covered porch across the front facing the maples, which is where Eleanor said, Frank always pictured 2 chairs. Through the front door, the entry opens with a bench and hooks and a slate floor to catch the mud, because this is Vermont and mud is a season all its own. The main room runs the full depth, oak floors carrying your eye out those big windows to the creek. Warm light, tall ceiling with Frank's rafters showing, sealed and clean. That new ridge beam running the length of it like a spine. The kitchen sits off the main room, bone cabinets and that quartz, and dead center over the sink is the window. You stand there washing a cup and the whole north slope is right in front of you. That was the promise. It's kept. The bathroom's simple and honest, white subway tile set straight, not fussy. A walk-in shower with a bench because Eleanor's not 50 anymore and neither am I. And a warm floor underfoot on a cold morning that runs off its own little thermostat. And the fireplace on the gable wall with Frank's pine mantle glowing over it. That's the heart of the house. That's the piece that was hiding in the joists, waiting 11 months for somebody to finish the thought. Step back outside and the porch faces west, the light coming gold through the maples, 2 chairs sitting there now. I put them there myself. All told, 16 weeks, stretched to 19 with my window, don't mistake in the reorder, right around $147,000. And a bundle of pine boards a man saved for a wife he loved. Eleanor walked through it last week. She didn't say much. She stood at the kitchen window a long time. Then she found the E under the mantle because she knew right where to look. And she put her hand on it and left it there a while. Here's what I know after 30 years of this. A house is just a record of the hours somebody gave it. Frank gave this one everything he had until the day he couldn't anymore. All I did was pick up the level where he set it down and keep the bubble centered. Somebody built this right the first time. Most days, my whole job is just being careful not to be the fool who wrecks what a better man started. Next one's already waiting for me. An 1890s schoolhouse 3 towns over, 1 big room, bell tower leaning about 4 degrees off true, and floorboards worn into grooves by 100 years of kids' feet. Everybody says the tower's coming down. We'll see about that. I'll see you there.